I can play piano in exchange for food." They laughed at the garbage man, not knowing he was a famous pianist. Harold Jenkins felt his stomach churn with hunger when he decided to enter the Grand Plaza Hotel that gala night. His calloused hands trembled as he held his dirty orange work uniform, knowing he could be thrown out at any moment. That's when he heard the piano notes echoing through the main hall. Without thinking twice, he approached the young pianist who was entertaining the event and made a request that would change his life forever. "Sir, might I play a song in exchange for a plate of food?" asked Harold, interrupting the performance. The entire hall turned to look. Women in expensive dresses covered their noses with perfumed handkerchiefs. Men in tuxedos whispered among themselves, bothered by the presence of that shabby intruder. Bradley Thompson, the young pianist hired for the event, stopped playing and looked Harold up and down. At 28, he was used to being the center of attention at high society New York events. "You must be joking, old man," said Bradley with a mocking smile. "Just look at the state you're in. This is no place for beggars." The guests laughed loudly. Some elegant ladies shook their heads in disapproval, as if Harold's mere presence could contaminate the refined atmosphere. "Please," insisted Harold, his voice weak from hunger. "It's been 3 days since I've had a proper meal. I just want to play one song." "3 days?" laughed Bradley. "And what does a garbage man like you know about music?" The question echoed through the hall, generating more cruel laughter. Harold lowered his head, feeling the weight of every judgmental stare. His hands, marked by years of hauling trash through the streets of the Upper East Side, trembled with humiliation. But then, something inside him ignited, a flame that had long been extinguished. "Let me show you," said Harold, raising his head with a dignity that surprised everyone. Bradley laughed even louder, encouraged by the guests' laughter. "All right, old man. You want to humiliate yourself? Come on then. But when you leave here in shame, I want you to remember you asked for this." Harold walked slowly to the grand piano. His shaky legs almost gave way, but he pressed on. Silence fell over the room as he sat on the upholstered bench, a stark contrast between his dirty clothes and the elegance of the instrument. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Harold placed his hands on the keys and closed his eyes. For a moment he was no longer there. He was back at the Metropolitan Opera House 15 years ago, when the world still knew his name. The first notes came out soft, almost whispered. It was the beginning of a complex composition that few pianists in the world could perform perfectly. Harold hadn't even warmed up his fingers, but his hands moved with a precision that defied logic. Bradley's mocking smile began to fade. He knew that piece. It was one of the most difficult in the classical repertoire, an impossible fusion between Chopin and George Gershwin that only the great virtuosos dared to attempt. The conversations ceased completely. Champagne glasses hung suspended in the air. The only sound in the hall was the notes flowing from Harold's calloused hands, like water from a crystal spring. The music grew, becoming more intense. Harold's fingers danced across the keys with a speed and precision that left everyone speechless. It wasn't just technique he demonstrated, but a deep emotion that touched the heart of every person present. Mrs. Eleanor Blackwell, a 72-year-old woman seated in the front row, dropped her champagne glass. The drink spilled on her party dress, but she didn't even notice. Her hands trembled as she brought one to her chest, as if trying to control her racing heartbeat. "It can't be," she murmured, so softly that only her companion heard. The music reached its climax. Harold was now playing with an intensity that made the entire piano vibrate. His hands flew across the keys at an impossible speed, yet every note came out clear and perfect. It was like watching magic, but real magic, made of pure talent and years of practice. When the final note echoed through the hall, a tomb-like silence fell over the room. No one moved, no one breathed. The only sound was the echo of the music still reverberating off the elegant walls. Harold slowly opened his eyes and looked at his own hands, as if he too were surprised by what he had just done. It had been so long since he had last played like that, with all his soul. Bradley was pale, his face contorted in a mixture of shock and humiliation. He knew talent when he saw it, and what he had just witnessed was far beyond his own abilities. Where did you learn to play like that?" he managed to ask, his voice trembling. Harold rose from the bench, his legs still shaky from emotion and hunger. "Music is my only companion in the early hours," he replied simply. "When the city sleeps and I work, it keeps me alive." It was then that Mrs. Eleanor abruptly rose from her chair. Her eyes were moist with tears, and she walked toward Harold with hesitant steps as if seeing a ghost. "Your name," she said, her voice choked. "What is your name?" Harold looked at the elegant lady approaching. There was something familiar about those eyes, but he couldn't place it. "Harold Jenkins, ma'am," he replied, bowing his head respectfully. Eleanor stopped right in front of him, studying every feature of his face with an intensity that began to make everyone uncomfortable. "No," she said, shaking her head slowly. "Your real name. I know that way of playing. I know every movement of your hands." Harold's heart began to beat faster. He took a step back, but Eleanor followed him. "Ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about," he lied, but his voice betrayed his nervousness. "Harold Winters," Eleanor said loudly, making the name echo through the hall like thunder. Several people gasped. Some older guests exchanged glances, recognizing the name they hadn't heard in over a decade. "No," said Harold, shaking his head vigorously. "You're mistaken. I'm just a garbage man. I've always been just a garbage man." But his hands were now shaking uncontrollably, and everyone could see he was lying. Bradley, who had been quietly watching the scene, suddenly took his phone out of his pocket and began discreetly recording. Something much bigger was happening here, and he sensed that this recording could change his life. Eleanor didn't take her eyes off Harold, like a predator that had finally found its prey. "Harold Winters," she repeated louder this time. "The greatest pianist this country has ever produced. The man who disappeared 15 years ago after the scandal that destroyed his career." Now the entire hall was in total silence, hanging on every word. The younger guests took out their phones to search for the name, while the older ones whispered among themselves, remembering the case that had shocked the American artistic community. "Please," begged Harold, his voice almost a whisper. "I just wanted to plate of food. I didn't mean to bother anyone." "Bother?" said Eleanor, tears now streaming freely down her wrinkled cheeks. "You're not bothering. You're bringing back a genius the world lost." She turned to the guests, her voice gaining strength. "Do you know who is here with us?" This man composed some of the most beautiful pieces of American music. He has performed on the greatest stages in the world. He was personally invited by the President of the Republic for private performances. Harold closed his eyes, feeling the weight of a past he had tried to bury for so many years. "That was a long time ago," he said. "That man no longer exists." "No?" challenged Eleanor. "Then explain how you just played American Rhapsody No. 3, a composition you created yourself, and that only you knew how to perform perfectly." The room erupted in murmurs. Some guests had already found old videos of Harold Winters on YouTube and were comparing the images with the man standing before them. Bradley approached, still filming. "It's true," he said, showing his phone screen. "I just watched a video of you performing at the Metropolitan Opera House in 2008. It's really you, just younger." Harold looked at the screen and saw his own image from 15 years earlier. An elegant man with dark hair and a youthful face, wearing a tuxedo and smiling for the cameras. The contrast with his current appearance was shocking. "What happened to you?" asked a lady from the back of the room. Harold took a deep breath. He knew there was no more running from the truth. "You want to know what happened?" he said, his voice gaining a bitterness that cut through the air. "I'll tell you then." He turned to the piano and played the first notes of a melancholic composition. "In 2009, I was at the peak of my career. I had just released my third album and was preparing for an international tour. My life was perfect. I had a house in Beverly Hills, imported cars, a family who loved me." His voice grew quieter, heavy with pain. "But I also had a student, a talented young man named Nathan Crawford. I had discovered him playing on the streets and decided to give him free lessons. I thought I was helping someone who deserved a chance. Tears began to stream down Harold's bearded cheeks. Nathan was ambitious, very ambitious. And when he realized he couldn't surpass me in talent, he decided to destroy me in another way. Eleanor moved closer, as if sensing what was coming next. He forged documents, bribed witnesses, created an elaborate hoax to make the world believe my compositions were plagiarized from his. He claimed I had stolen the songs he composed in secret. A murmur of indignation swept through the room. "But that's impossible," protested Bradley. "How could he prove such a thing?" "Money," Harold replied bitterly. "A lot of money. Nathan had married the daughter of a wealthy businessman. With her family's resources, he managed to bribe people, falsify dates, create fake documentation that seemed to prove his version of events." Harold stopped playing and looked at his hands. "The worst part is that some of my own compositions were very personal. I had created them in intimate moments, alone at home, without any witnesses. It was impossible to prove they were mine." "But your style," said Eleanor. "Anyone with a musical ear could identify them as your compositions." "They could," agreed Harold. "But Nathan was clever. He had studied with me for years. He knew my style better than anyone else. When he started playing my music in public, claiming it was his, he could imitate it well enough to convince the unsuspecting." Eleanor's expression changed. Something in her eyes revealed a deeper knowledge of that story. "Go on," she said, but there was a strange tone in her voice. "The case went to court," Harold continued, "but I was fighting an opponent who had endless resources and no scruples. His forgeries were perfect. The bribed witnesses were convincing, and I was just a naive artist who had never had to fight for something that was obviously mine." He rose from the piano and walked to the window, looking out at the New York night. "I lost the case. I lost my reputation. I lost my career. Record labels cancelled my contracts. Theaters closed their doors to me. My own family began to doubt me." "Your family?" someone asked. Harold closed his eyes, as if the next words were physically painful to utter. "My wife, Pamela, tried to support me at first, but when the money ran out, when the bills started piling up and friends disappeared, she began to believe that maybe I was really guilty." "And your daughter?" "Emily was 15 at the time. She was at school when the scandal broke. Imagine what it was like for a teenager to discover that everyone was saying her father was a thief, a forger." Harold's tears were flowing freely now. "She told me she was ashamed of me, that she couldn't look at me anymore without wondering if I was really who she thought I was. That shattered me more than any court sentence." The hall was completely silent. Even the waiters had stopped serving to listen to the story. "Pamela asked for a divorce 6 months later. She took Emily and moved to Chicago. I lost everything in 1 year. The house, the cars, the family, the career, everything." "But why didn't you fight?" asked Bradley. "Why didn't you try to prove your innocence?" "I tried," said Harold, turning to face the young pianist. "I tried for 2 years. I spent my last savings hiring lawyers, private investigators, forgery experts. But Nathan was always one step ahead." He returned to the piano and began to play a sad melody. "After a while, I realized I was fighting a losing battle. Nathan had built an empire on my creations. He was giving TV interviews, recording albums, going on world tours, all with music that came from my heart." "And what did you do?" "I disappeared," Harold said simply. "I changed my name, changed my appearance, changed my life. Harold Winters died, and Harold Jenkins, the garbage man, was born." Eleanor, who had grown increasingly pale during the account, suddenly put her hand to her mouth, as if trying to hold back a scream. "My God," she whispered. "Oh my God." Everyone turned to her, realizing that something had drastically changed in her expression. "Mom?" asked Harold, puzzled by the reaction. "Are you feeling all right?" Eleanor began to tremble uncontrollably. "Nathan Crawford," she said, her voice almost inaudible. "Nathan Crawford is my son-in-law." A deathly silence fell over the hall. It was as if the air had been sucked from the room. "What did you say?" asked Harold, feeling his legs go weak. "My daughter, Patricia. She married Nathan Crawford in 2010. I am the mother-in-law of the man who destroyed your life. Harold staggered, needing to lean on the piano to keep from falling. It can't be, he murmured. That's why I recognized your playing style, continued Eleanor, tears now streaming freely. Nathan used to play your music at home. He said they were his compositions, but I always thought it was strange. His talent seemed artificial, forced. She approached Harold, her hands outstretched in a desperate gesture. I never questioned it because he was my son-in-law, because I wanted to believe my daughter had married a genius. But deep down, there was always something that bothered me. You knew? Asked Harold, his voice filled with contained anger. You knew he had stolen from me? No, protested Eleanor. I never knew. If I had known. If you had known what? Harold exploded, his composure finally breaking. Would you have done something? Would you have stopped him from destroying my life? The entire room was tense, sensing the situation was escalating rapidly. Harold, please, said Eleanor, reaching out her hands. You need to understand. Understand what? He shouted. That while I was starving on the streets, your son-in-law was making millions with my creations. That while I was losing my family, he was building his with stolen money. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Bradley, still filming everything, approached cautiously. Calm down, Mr. Harold, he said. Mrs. Eleanor isn't to blame for what your son-in-law did. Not to blame? Harold laughed bitterly. You think I don't know who the Blackwell family is? You think I don't know it was her money that funded that whole farce? Eleanor paled even more. What are you saying? Your husband, Jonathan Blackwell, was a partner with the lawyers that Nathan hired. He was the one paying the bribes to the witnesses. It was your family's money that was buying my destruction. The revelation fell like a bomb in the room. Eleanor staggered, needing to sit in a nearby chair. No, she whispered. Jonathan wouldn't do that. He wouldn't know. He knew, shouted Harold. Everyone knew. The only one who didn't know was me, the idiot who believed justice existed. Eleanor's tears turned into uncontrollable sobs. Harold, I swear to God I knew nothing about this. If I had known... But now you know, said Harold, his voice becoming dangerously calm. Now you know the truth about the genius you created in your family. He turned to the guests, who watched the scene horrified and fascinated. Want to know how I found all this out? He asked. It was 5 years ago. I was working on garbage collection at a commercial building when I found discarded documents, papers from the law office, payment receipts, transfer receipts. His voice was getting louder, more desperate. Do you know what it's like to discover that your own destruction cost $3 million? That there were spreadsheets detailing how much each false witness cost, each forged document, each bribed judge? The silence in the room was sepulchral. Some guests had started to cry, others were filming with their cell phones. And do you know what else I found in those papers? Continued Harold. I discovered that my own wife had received money to testify against me. The shock of the revelation made several people gasp. No, said Eleanor, shaking her head. That can't be true. $50,000, said Harold, his voice sharp as a blade. That's how much they paid my wife to say in court that she always suspected I plagiarized other composers. He laughed, but it was a sound without joy, filled with bitterness. Imagine what it was like for me to discover that. To discover that the woman I loved, who said she loved me, had sold our family for $50,000. Eleanor was sobbing uncontrollably now. Harold, please, let me help. Let me fix this. Fix? Laughed Harold. How are you going to fix 15 lost years of my life? How are you going to give me back my daughter, who grew up believing her father was a criminal? How are you going to give me back my career, my reputation, my dignity? He approached Eleanor, who shrank in the chair. You want to help me? Then tell me. Where is my family now? What happened to Pamela and Emily? Eleanor wiped her tears and looked into his eyes. Pamela? Pamela remarried. She lives in Chicago with her second husband. And Emily? And Emily? Asked Harold, anxious. Emily graduated from medical school. She's a pediatrician at Mount Sinai Hospital. She never married, never had children. Harold closed his eyes, absorbing the information. "Does she know?" he asked. "Does she know the truth about what happened to me?" Eleanor hesitated before answering. "I don't know, but Nathan has always been very careful to maintain the official version of the story. He never admitted anything, not even to the family." "Of course not," said Harold bitterly. "Why would he admit it? He built an empire on my creations. Why would he risk losing everything now?" It was then that a woman's voice cut through the air in the hall. "Because sometimes the truth has a way of coming out, no matter what we do to hide it." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. A woman of about 30 had entered the hall. She was elegant, wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather briefcase. "Who are you?" asked Eleanor, wiping away her tears. "My name is Dr. Kathleen Sullivan. I'm an investigative journalist, and for 2 years I've been investigating irregularities in the American artistic community." Harold's heart raced. "And what does that have to do with me?" Kathleen approached, taking some documents out of her briefcase. "It has everything to do with you, Mr. Winters, because Nathan Crawford made a fatal mistake 6 months ago." She showed the papers for everyone to see. "He tried to pull the same scam on another young pianist, a young man named Tyler Wilson, 22 years old, who was just starting his career." Bradley approached to look at the documents. "What do you mean?" "Nathan saw potential in the young man and offered free mentorship, exactly as he did with you 15 years ago," explained Kathleen, looking at Harold. "But Tyler was smarter. When he realized Nathan was trying to steal his compositions, he came to me." Eleanor rose from her chair, unsteady. "What did you find?" "We found a pattern," said Kathleen. "Nathan had done this to at least 3 other pianists over the years. You weren't the only one, Mr. Winters." The revelation hit Harold like a punch to the stomach. "Others?" "Yes, but you were the only one famous enough to make the elaborate staging worthwhile. The others were just talented young people he silenced with intimidation and threats." Kathleen opened more documents. "But Tyler was smart. He recorded all his conversations with Nathan, documented everything. And when we started investigating, we uncovered the entire network." "What network?" "The corruption network that allowed Nathan to steal your compositions and destroy your life. Lawyers, judges, witnesses, even your ex-wife. Everyone was being paid by the Blackwell family." Eleanor let out a cry and collapsed back into the chair. "It can't be true. Jonathan wouldn't do that." "He did, Mrs. Blackwell," said Kathleen gently. "And we have all the evidence. Bank statements, phone recordings, signed documents, everything." She turned to Harold. "Mr. Winters, you were the victim of the greatest artistic fraud in the history of the United States, and I'm here to offer you the chance to clear your name." Harold was in shock, barely able to process the information. "How?" "My investigation will become a series of reports to be published next week, but I would like to include your testimony, your version of the facts, your story of survival." "But," Harold began, then stopped. "Why now? Why after so long?" "Because Tyler didn't give up," replied Kathleen. "When Nathan tried to destroy him, he came to me. And when we started investigating, your name appeared everywhere. You were the most well-documented case because it involved more money and more people." Bradley, who had recorded everything, approached Harold. "Mr. Winters," he said, his voice choked, I need to ask for your forgiveness." "Forgiveness?" "For mocking you, for doubting you. I've been a pianist for over 10 years and I've never seen anyone play like you did today. I should have realized immediately that I was in the presence of a genius." Bradley knelt before Harold, to the shock of all present. "Accept me as your student," he said. "Allow me to learn from you, and let me help restore your reputation." Harold looked at the young man kneeling before him, then at Eleanor, who was silently crying, then at Kathleen, who held the proof of his innocence. I don't know," he said, his voice trembling. "It's been so long that I've just been Harold Jenkins, the garbage man. I don't know if I can be Harold Winters, the pianist, again." "You never stopped being him," said Bradley, still kneeling. "What I saw here today wasn't a garbage man playing the piano. It was a master demonstrating his art." Kathleen stepped closer. "Mr. Winters, I understand your hesitation, but you have a unique opportunity here, not just to clear your name, but to expose all the corruption that destroyed your life. And Nathan? Asked Harold. What will happen to him? With the evidence we have, he will face multiple charges: forgery, bribery, corruption, intellectual property theft. He will probably spend years in prison. Eleanor sobbed even louder upon hearing this. And my daughter, continued Harold. What will this do to her when she finds out her husband is a criminal? Your daughter will discover the truth about her father, said Kathleen softly. That he was never a criminal. That he was the victim of one of the greatest injustices in the history of American music. Harold looked again at his calloused hands. 15 years, he murmured. 15 years hauling trash, sleeping in shelters, going hungry. 15 years believing that maybe I was truly guilty of something. But you survived, said Bradley, rising to his feet. And you never lost your talent. The music you played today proves that. Bradley is right, agreed Eleanor, wiping her tears and stepping closer. Harold, I know I can't undo what my family did, but I can help fix it. How? I have contacts throughout the music industry. I can open doors, facilitate meetings, help restore your career. And more importantly, I can testify publicly about what I discovered today. Kathleen nodded. Mrs. Blackwell's testimony would be crucial for my report. An insider from the family that funded the entire farce. Harold was silent for a long moment, processing everything that had happened. In a single night, his life had turned completely around. And if I accept, he asked finally, if I decide to fight to get my name back? Then we start tomorrow, said Kathleen. I already have most of the investigation ready. I just need your testimony to complete the picture. And I will help in every way, said Bradley. I will use my contacts in the music media to publicize your story. I will record with you, I will perform with you. I will do everything I can. Eleanor stepped forward and, hesitantly, placed her hand on Harold's arm. And I will use all my influence and resources to ensure you have the best possible legal team. It's the least I can do after discovering my family funded your destruction. Harold looked around the hall. Dozens of people watched him, awaiting his decision. Many were crying, moved by the story they had witnessed. You don't understand, he said finally. It's not just about clearing my name or getting my career back. It's about facing 15 years of pain, of humiliation, of loss. He turned to Eleanor. It's about looking at the woman whose money funded my destruction and trying to find forgiveness in my heart. Eleanor lowered her head, ashamed. It's about starting to believe again that I deserve a dignified life after so long convincing myself I was just human trash. His voice broke on the last phrase and several people in the hall began to cry openly. But most importantly, he continued, wiping his own tears, it's about the possibility of reclaiming my daughter, about maybe, one day, being able to look into her eyes and see pride instead of shame. The silence in the hall was absolute. That's why, said Harold, straightening his shoulders, I accept. The hall erupted in applause. People stood up, shouted, cried. Bradley hugged Harold. Eleanor wept with relief. Kathleen smiled with satisfaction. But I have conditions, said Harold, making the hall fall silent again. What are they? Asked Kathleen. First, I want the whole truth to be told, not just about Nathan, but about everyone involved. Lawyers, judges, witnesses, my ex-wife, everyone. Done, Kathleen agreed immediately. Second, I want part of the recovered funds to go to underprivileged young musicians, so they won't have to depend on corrupt mentors like I did. That's a beautiful idea, said Eleanor. I can help organize that. And third, said Harold, his voice growing weaker, I want someone to contact my daughter before the story is published. She deserves to hear the truth from a person, not from the press. I can do that, offered Eleanor. I've known Emily since she was a child. I can talk to her. No, said Harold, shaking his head. Not you. After everything your family has done, it would be too cruel to use you as a messenger. He turned to Kathleen. Can you do this? As a journalist, you have credibility. You can present the evidence objectively. Of course, agreed Kathleen. I can go to Chicago tomorrow. Harold took a deep breath as if preparing for a leap into the unknown. Then it's decided. Harold Winters is back. The hall erupted in applause again, but this time Harold smiled. For the first time in 15 years, he smiled for real. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 3 days later, Kathleen was sitting in a cafe at Mount Sinai Hospital in Chicago, waiting for Dr. Emily Winters. It had been difficult to convince the young doctor to agree to the meeting, but when Kathleen mentioned it was about her father, Emily agreed. The woman who entered the cafe just after noon was elegant and serious. At 30 years old, Emily had inherited her father's delicate features, but her eyes carried a hardness that spoke of years of pent-up pain. "Dr. Sullivan?" she asked, approaching the table where Kathleen was sitting. "Yes, thank you for agreeing to meet me, Dr. Emily." Emily sat down, clearly uncomfortable. "I'll be direct. I haven't spoken about my father for 15 years. I don't know why I agreed to come here today. Perhaps because deep down, you always knew there was something wrong with that whole story," Kathleen suggested gently. Emily stared at her coldly. "My father stole compositions from other artists. He was tried, and he lost. There's nothing more to discuss." "What if I told you he was the victim of the biggest judicial farce in the history of American music?" "I'd say you're wasting my time." Kathleen opened her briefcase and placed a series of documents on the table. "Then give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes to show you evidence that will change everything you believe about your father." Emily looked at the papers, hesitant. "What kind of evidence?" "Bank statements showing payments to false witnesses, phone recordings of Nathan Crawford confessing to the crime, forged documents, and most importantly, proof that your own mother received money to testify against your father." Emily paled. That's not possible." "Unfortunately, it is not only possible, but proven. Emily, your father was never guilty of anything. He was the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by Nathan Crawford and funded by the Blackwell family." Kathleen began showing the documents one by one, explaining each piece of evidence. With each revelation, Emily grew paler, more shocked. "No," she whispered when she saw the payment receipt to her mother. "Mom wouldn't do that." "She did, Emily. $50,000 to testify against her own husband." Emily put her hands over her face, trying to hold back the tears. "Why? Why would she do such a thing?" "According to our investigations, she was being blackmailed. Nathan had discovered she was having an extramarital affair and threatened to expose everything if she didn't cooperate." "My God," murmured Emily. "So, Dad, your father was completely innocent. More than that, he was a genius whose life was destroyed by greed and corruption." Emily was openly crying now. Where is he?" Kathleen smiled gently. "He's in New York waiting to talk to you, if you want." "How long has he been waiting?" 15 years. The answer hit Emily like a slap. She sobbed even louder, drawing curious looks from other people in the cafe. Did he try to contact me?" "Several times, but your mother always intercepted. She told him you didn't want to see him, that you were ashamed of him." "That's not true," Emily burst out. "I wanted to see him. I always did. But Mom said he was running away, that he didn't want to take responsibility for what he had done." "Another lie," said Kathleen softly. "Your father never ran from anything. He just couldn't bear to see the shame in the eyes of the people he loved." Emily wiped her tears and looked at Kathleen with determination. "I want to see him. Now." "Are you sure? 15 years is a long time. You've both changed a lot." "I'm sure. I need to apologize to him. I need to tell him I always believed in him deep in my heart." Kathleen smiled. "Then let's go to New York today." That same afternoon, Harold was in the small apartment that Bradley had lent him, trying to mentally prepare himself for the reunion with his daughter. He had showered, shaved, and put on clean clothes, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The doorbell rang at 7 in the evening. Harold took a deep breath and went to open the door. On the other side was his daughter. The 15-year-old girl he had left behind had transformed into a beautiful, successful woman, but her eyes were the same, large, expressive, full of intelligence. "Daddy," was all she could say before breaking down in tears. Harold hugged her as if his life depended on it. 15 years of pain, longing, and guilt dissolved in that embrace. "My daughter," he murmured. "My little girl." They held each other for several minutes, crying and trying to make up for all the lost time. "Daddy, I'm so sorry for doubting you," sobbed Emily. "You were just a child," said Harold, stroking her hair. "You couldn't have known. But I should have trusted. I should have known my father would never do anything dishonorable. No, my love, you were manipulated by the adults around you. The blame was never yours." They slowly pulled apart, studying each other's faces. "You look so different," said Emily, gently touching the face marked by difficult years. "Oh, you've become a beautiful woman," replied Harold, "and a doctor. I always knew you would be special." "Daddy, I have so much to tell you. My life, my career, my dreams. But first, I need to know, how did you survive all these years?" Harold led her to the sofa where they sat side by side. "It was hard, Emily, very hard. There were days when I thought about giving up on everything." "What kept you alive?" "The music," he replied without hesitation, "and the hope that one day I could explain the truth to you." Emily began to cry again. "I always knew deep in my heart. When I heard your music being played on the radio, when they said it was by Nathan Crawford, something inside me screamed that it was wrong. You listened to my music, all of it. I bought every album Nathan released with your compositions. I told myself I was listening to his music, but deep down I knew I was listening to you." Harold smiled through his tears. "And you? How was your life?" "Kathleen told me you became a pediatrician. Yes, I specialized in underprivileged children. I work in the public system, helping families with limited resources." "Why?" Emily smiled timidly. "Because I remembered my father, the man who always cared for the less fortunate, who gave free lessons to young people without means." Harold was moved to realize that despite everything, his daughter had kept alive the values he had tried to teach her. "And your personal life? Boyfriends? Family?" Emily lowered her head. "I never managed to have a serious relationship with anyone. I was always afraid they would find out about my past, about you." "Emily, no, Daddy. Let me finish. I lived 15 years ashamed of a crime you never committed. I wasted 15 years running from my own name." She looked into his eyes. "But that's over. From today on, I will be proud to be Emily Winters. I will tell the whole world that I am the daughter of the greatest pianist this country has ever produced." At that moment, the doorbell rang again. Harold went to answer and found Bradley, Eleanor, and Kathleen on the other side of the door. "Sorry to interrupt," said Bradley, "but we have important news." They entered the apartment, where Emily stood to greet them. "Emily," said Eleanor, visibly emotional, "you've become a beautiful woman. I'm so sorry for everything my family did to you." "Mrs. Eleanor," replied Emily, "Kathleen explained your involvement in all this. I know you were unaware of the crimes." "Even so, I feel responsible." Kathleen approached with more documents. "I have news that will interest everyone. Nathan Crawford was arrested this morning." Everyone fell silent, absorbing the information. "How?" asked Harold. "The evidence was irrefutable. When the police presented all the evidence we gathered, he had no choice but to confess." "He confessed? Everything. The thefts, the corruption, the forgeries, and more. He ratted out all his accomplices in exchange for a reduced sentence." Bradley smiled. "That means your innocence will be officially recognized, Mr. Harold." "And that's not all," added Eleanor. "The copyrights to all your compositions will be returned. You will receive 15 years' worth of royalties from sales and performances." Harold seemed stunned by the information. How much money is that?" "Approximately 8 million Ries," replied Kathleen. Emily gasped. 8 million? "Your songs were worldwide hits, Daddy," she said. "They played in every country, were used in movies, commercials, soap operas. You are one of the most played American composers in the world." Harold sat down heavily on the sofa, trying to process the magnitude of the turnaround in his life. "I don't know if I can handle all this," he murmured. "You don't have to handle it alone," said Emily, sitting beside him. I will be here. Forever. And me too, added Bradley. You're not just my teacher anymore, you're my partner. Partner. I wrote a symphony based on your life story. I wanted you to hear it, and if you approve, for us to play it together at the official comeback of Harold Winters. Eleanor stepped closer. I've already spoken with the directors of the Metropolitan Opera House. They want to organize a special concert in your honor. It will be a historic event, the return of the greatest American pianist. Harold looked around at all those people who, in a matter of days, had become his new family. I accept, he finally said. I accept everything. The concert, the partnership with Bradley, the fight to restore my reputation. And me, Emily asked playfully. Do you accept having your daughter back? Harold hugged her again. You are the most precious thing I've recovered through all this. 15 years without you were 15 years I spent just surviving. Now I can start living again. That night they stayed up talking late. Harold played the old upright piano Bradley had lent him. Emily hummed the songs she remembered from childhood. Eleanor told stories of how classical American music had evolved during Harold's years of exile. Daddy, said Emily when it was past midnight, can I ask you a question? Of course, my dear. How did you manage to keep your sanity all those years? How did you not go mad with anger and bitterness? Harold thought for a moment before answering. Music, Emily. No matter how much I wanted to, I could never stop composing. Even in the toughest moments, melodies kept coming to my head. He stood up and went to the piano. Would you like to hear something I composed thinking of you? You wrote music for me. Several pieces, but this one is special. Harold began to play a sweet, melancholic melody. It was a piece that spoke of longing, but also of hope, of unconditional love and forgiveness. I composed it on your 18th birthday, he explained as he played. I was working on the garbage collection route when I remembered it was your birthday. I went back home and spent the whole night composing this. Emily cried silently as she listened. It's beautiful, Daddy. It's yours. It always was. When he finished playing, a respectful silence filled the room. Harold, Eleanor finally said, may I ask a favor? Of course. I want you to play at my granddaughter's wedding. She's getting married in 2 months and it would be an honor to have you there. Harold hesitated. Eleanor, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not sure if... Please, she insisted. It would be a way for my family to begin making amends for the wrong we've done. It's not about amends, it's that I'm still getting used to the idea of returning to public life. Then start slowly, suggested Bradley. Small, intimate events, to readjust. Harold looked at Emily, who smiled encouragingly. All right, he agreed, but on one condition, Emily and Bradley play with me. I don't know how to play anything, laughed Emily. Then learn. We have 2 months. Really? Completely serious. I want to teach music to my daughter. It's something I've always dreamed of doing. Emily hugged him excitedly. Then it's settled. We'll make music together. The days that followed were intense. Harold's story quickly spread through national and international media. Newspapers around the world ran headlines about the American pianist who rose from the dead. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were also those who questioned his version of events, who suggested the whole story was a staged act to regain lost fame. Don't pay them any mind, said Kathleen during one of the many interviews Harold gave. The evidence is irrefutable. Anyone with half a brain can see that. I don't care about the skeptics, Harold replied. I only care about honoring the trust of the people who believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. The preparations for the comeback concert at the Metropolitan Opera House became an event in itself. Bradley had composed not just a symphony, but an entire suite based on Harold's life. It's divided into 5 movements, he explained during a rehearsal. The first represents his youth and rise, the second, the betrayal and fall, the third, the years of exile, the fourth, the discovery of the truth, and the fifth, the rebirth. And where does Emily come in? She will play a solo in the 4th movement. It represents the family love that survived everything. Emily had dedicated herself completely to learning the piano in the last few weeks. Her doctor's hands, used to surgical precision, had adapted surprisingly well to the keys. She has natural talent, said Harold to Bradley after a particularly successful rehearsal. She inherited more from me than I imagined. "The talent was always there," replied Bradley. "It just needed to be awakened." A week before the concert, Harold received an unexpected visit. It was his ex-wife, Pamela. She was at the apartment door, visibly aged and carrying a weight of guilt and shame that was reflected in every line of her face. "Harold," she said when he opened the door. "May I come in?" He hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let her pass. "Is Emily here?" asked Pamela, looking around. "No, she's at the hospital working." Pamela sat in the living room, clearly uncomfortable. "I came to ask for forgiveness," she said bluntly. "Forgiveness for what, Pamela? For believing the lies about me or for being part of them?" She began to cry. "For everything, Harold, for doubting you, for accepting that dirty money, for keeping Emily away from you all these years." $50,000, said Harold, his voice cold. "That's how much our family cost. I know there's no excuse for what I did, but you need to understand. They blackmailed me. They knew about Richard." "Richard?" "My extramarital affair. They said if I didn't testify against you, they would tell everything. They would destroy my reputation too." Harold laughed bitterly. "So you chose to destroy mine instead." "I was desperate, Harold, scared. I didn't know what to do." "Yes, you did. You could have told me the truth. You could have trusted me. You could have fought by my side instead of stabbing me in the back." Pamela sobbed even louder. "You're right. I was a coward. I was selfish. I was everything bad a wife can be." "Why are you here now, Pamela? Why did you decide to show up after 15 years? "Because I saw it on television. I saw that you were exonerated. I saw that Emily came back into your life. And I realized I lost the two most important people in the world because of my cowardice." "And what do you want? For me to forgive you? For us to be a happy family again, Emily?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "I know that's impossible. I just want you to know that I've regretted it every single day since I did that, and that I never stopped loving you, even though I betrayed your trust in the worst way possible." Harold was silent for a long moment. "Pamela," he said finally, "I can't forgive you now. I don't know if I ever will. What you did wasn't just a mistake. It was a conscious betrayal that cost me 15 years of my life." "I understand. But I also won't carry anger for the rest of my life. I've already carried too much weight. So I will try, in time, to find peace about this." Pamela nodded, knowing it was more than she deserved. "And Emily?" she asked. "Emily is an adult. She can decide whether or not she wants to have a relationship with you. I won't influence her one way or the other." "Thank you," said Pamela, getting up to leave. "And Harold, I hope you are very happy. You deserve all the happiness in the world." After she left, Harold sat in the living room reflecting on the conversation. When Emily arrived from the hospital a few hours later, he told her about the visit. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Strange," admitted Harold. "On one hand, it was good to hear that she regrets it. On the other, it made me even more aware of everything I lost." "Dad, can I say something without you taking offense?" "Of course." "I think deep down Mom's betrayal was almost a favor." Harold looked at her, surprised. "How so?" "If she had been loyal, if she had fought by your side, perhaps you could have proven your innocence back then. But you would also have spent years in courtrooms, wasting energy on hatred and revenge. And that would be bad? Perhaps, because then you would never have lived this experience of starting over from scratch. You would never have developed this humility, this wisdom you now possess. You would never have composed the music you wrote during those years of suffering." Harold smiled. "Are you saying becoming a garbage man did me good?" "I'm saying suffering transformed you into a better man than you were before. And that, in some way, was a gift." "Are you sure you're a doctor and not a philosopher?" Emily laughed. "Both. Working with sick children taught me a lot about finding meaning in pain." Harold hugged her. "You've become a very wise woman, my daughter. I learned from the best teacher, life." The night of the concert finally arrived. The Metropolitan Opera House was packed, with people from all over the United States and even from abroad. The international press covered the event as one of the greatest comebacks in music history. Backstage, Harold was nervous for the first time in decades. "What if I forget the music?" he asked Bradley. "It's been so long since I played on a real stage." "You won't forget," Bradley assured him. "The music is in your soul, it always has been." Emily approached, elegant in her concert gown. "Daddy, no matter what happens tonight, to me you've already won." "Why?" "Because you proved it's possible to survive the greatest injustice and still keep your dignity and talent intact." Eleanor was also backstage, having funded part of the concert as a form of reparation. "Harold," she said, "I want you to know that tonight isn't just about music. It's about justice, and about proving that the truth always finds a way." When the time came, Harold walked onto the stage alone first. The audience rose in an ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Many people cried, moved by the symbolism of that moment. Harold sat at the piano and looked at the audience. He could see familiar faces, journalists who had covered the original scandal, musicians who had abandoned him back then, critics who had destroyed his reputation. But he also saw new faces, young people who knew his story only from recent media coverage, children who had come with their parents, ordinary people who had been touched by his story of overcoming. "Good evening," he said into the microphone. 15 years ago, I left this stage believing I would never return. Today, I'm back not just as a pianist, but as a man who learned that music has the power to heal even the deepest wounds." He began to play. The first piece was one of his most famous compositions, but performed differently, more mature, filled with an emotion that only suffering can teach. The audience was mesmerized. Every note was perfect. But more than that, every note carried a story, a lesson, a tear. Bradley joined him for the symphony he had composed. The two pianos conversed as if they were two generations of musicians, the experienced master and the talented disciple, united by their passion for art. But the most moving moment was when Emily stepped onto the stage for her solo. Her hands, which saved lives at the hospital, now created beauty through music. "This is my daughter," Harold said into the microphone, with pride he couldn't hide. 15 years ago, she was a girl who doubted me. Today, she is a woman who teaches me about forgiveness and unconditional love." Emily played as if she had been performing for decades. Her performance wasn't technically perfect, but it was honest, emotional, full of love. When she finished, the entire opera house was in tears. Even the most skeptical critics were visibly moved. For the finale, Harold played alone once more. The piece he chose was a new composition, created especially for that evening. "This piece is called New Beginning," he said, "and it's about second chances, about justice long delayed, about the power of love to heal any wound." The melody began softly, almost whispered, like the first rays of sun after a long night. It grew gradually, gaining strength and complexity, representing the journey back to life. There were passages that spoke of pain, others of hope, moments of anger, moments of forgiveness. It was a musical autobiography, the story of a man who had lost everything and found a way to be reborn. When the final note echoed through the theater, the silence lasted only a few seconds before erupting into the greatest ovation that stage had ever witnessed. People stood up, applauded, shouted, cried. The ovation lasted more than 10 minutes. Harold tried to leave the stage several times, but the audience wouldn't let him. Emily and Bradley went back on stage to join him. The three embraced while the crowd continued to applaud wildly. "You did it," shouted Eleanor from the box, also applauding. "You proved that the truth always wins." In the days following the concert, Harold became a worldwide celebrity. His compositions returned to the top of the charts. Publishers fought for the rights to his biography. Movie producers wanted to make a film about his story. But Harold was more interested in other things. "I want to open a school," he said to Emily during a lunch. "A music school for underprivileged youth." "With what money?" "With the royalties I'm receiving." And Eleanor offered to help with the administrative side. "It's a beautiful idea, Dad. But are you sure you want to get involved with teaching again? After what happened with Nathan?" "Exactly because of what happened with Nathan," replied Harold. "I want to teach young people who truly need opportunities, not ambitious youngsters who only want to use others to get ahead in life. The Harold Winters School of Music opened 6 months later in an underprivileged neighborhood of New York. The building was simple, but it had good acoustics and quality instruments. On the first day of classes, Harold was nervous again. "What if it doesn't work?" he asked Rodrigo, who had agreed to be the school's educational director. "It will work," assured Bradley, "because this time you're not just teaching technique, you're teaching life." The first class had 20 students, ranging in age from 8 to 18. They all came from low-income families and had shown some musical talent in auditions held throughout the city. "Welcome," said Harold on the first day. "You are here because you have a gift. My job is to help you develop that gift, but also to teach you that music is much more than technique. It's character." A 12-year-old girl raised her hand. "Professor Harold, is it true that you used to be a garbage man?" "It's true, Amanda, and I'm not ashamed of it." "Why not?" "Because honest work doesn't shame anyone. What brings shame is stealing, lying, cheating. External or internal cleanliness, it doesn't matter. What's important is to keep your dignity." During the months that followed, the school thrived. The students learned not only music, but also values. Harold made a point of telling them his story, emphasizing the importance of honesty and perseverance. "Life will test you," he said during one class. "You will face injustices, betrayals, disappointments. But if you keep your character intact and keep doing what you love, you will overcome everything." One of the students, a 16-year-old boy named Thomas, quickly stood out. "Professor," he said after a particularly intense lesson, "can I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "Do you still feel anger toward the man who stole your music?" Harold thought for a moment. "You know, Thomas, for a long time I felt a lot of anger. Anger at Nathan, at my ex-wife, at the system that wrongfully convicted me. But I learned that anger is like poison. It hurts the one who feels it more than the one who provoked it." "So you've forgiven everyone?" "Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or pretending nothing happened. It means choosing not to let the hurt continue poisoning our soul." "And how do you do that?" "By focusing on what's good in life, on music, on family, on the people who truly matter. Anger takes up space in the soul. If you drive it out, you can fill that space with better things." Thomas nodded, absorbing the lesson. "Professor, when I grow up, I want to be like you." "No, Thomas. Be like yourself, but better. Learn from my mistakes and successes, but build your own story." 1 year after the school opened, Eleanor sought out Harold with an unexpected proposal. "I want you to marry me," she said, without beating around the bush. Harold nearly choked on the coffee he was drinking. "What?" "Not romantically," laughed Eleanor. "I'm too old for that nonsense, but civilly, so I can transfer my assets to you when I die." "Eleanor, I don't need more money." "It's not about you. It's about the school, about the children you're helping. I want to make sure that when I'm gone, my fortune will be used to continue your work. But you have family. You have a daughter, grandchildren, who already have enough money, and who frankly have done nothing to deserve it besides being born into the right family." Eleanor moved closer to Harold. "You, on the other hand, lost 15 years of your life because of my family's money. It's only fair that same money be used to fix some of the damage it caused." "And what will your family say?" "I don't care. I've already spoken with my lawyers. It's all legal and irrevocable." Harold was touched by the proposal. "Eleanor, you don't need to do this to redeem yourself. You've already done more than enough. I'm not doing it for redemption. I'm doing it because I believe in your work, and I want to make sure it continues even after I'm gone." 3 months later, they married in a simple civil ceremony, with only the necessary witnesses. Emily was the maid of honor. Bradley was the best man. "Dad," said Emily after the ceremony, "are you sure about what you're doing?" "Completely. Eleanor is a woman of integrity who wants to use her wealth to do good. I can't think of anything more honorable than that. And doesn't it feel strange to marry for practical reasons?" Harold smiled. "Emily, at 65, you learn that there are many forms of love. I love Eleanor as a great friend whom I deeply admire. Perhaps it's a more mature love than the wild passion of youth." The marriage of convenience ended up turning into a genuine partnership. Eleanor and Harold discovered they had much in common: a love for music, social concern, a sense of justice. "You know something," said Eleanor one evening, as they watched a concert by one of the school's students. "I think this was the best marriage of my life." "Why?" "Because it was based on mutual respect and shared purposes. My first marriage was for social convention. This one is for personal conviction." 2 years after Harold's return to the stage, Nathan Crawford was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The sentence was considered light by international standards, but it at least represented some justice. On the day of the sentencing, journalists asked Harold how he felt. "Relieved," he answered. "Not out of vengeance, but because it means the case is officially closed. I can move forward without looking back." "Would you visit him in prison?" "No, I have nothing to say to him. My life now is about building, not about settling past grievances." "And if he asked for forgiveness?" "That would be a matter between him and his own conscience. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for or grant as a favor. It's something that happens when we're ready, if it happens at all." That night at home, Eleanor asked a similar question. "Have you truly forgiven Nathan?" "No," admitted Harold, "and perhaps I never will completely. But I've learned to live without needing forgiveness to be happy." "What's the difference?" "Forgiving would mean forgetting the hurt. I haven't forgotten, but I don't let the hurt rule my life either. It's like a scar. It's there, but it doesn't hurt anymore." At the school, Harold's students began to stand out in national competitions. Amanda, the girl who had asked about him being a garbage man, won first place in a national young pianists competition. "Professor Harold," she said after her victory, "I want to dedicate my award to you." "Why, Amanda?" "Because you taught me that talent without character is worthless, that it's possible to be the best musician in the world and still be a terrible person. And what else did I learn from you? That music isn't competition, it's expression, it's a way to connect souls." On the school's 3rd anniversary, it already had over 100 students and a 2-year waiting list. Harold had become not just a respected teacher, but a symbol of overcoming adversity. "You know what the most rewarding part of all this is?" he said to Emily during her visit to the school. "What?" "Seeing that I'm shaping a generation of musicians who value not just technical excellence, but also personal integrity. Do you think any of them will become famous?" "Some will, certainly. But I hope that when that happens, they remember the lessons they learned here, that they use their success to help others, not just to benefit themselves." That night, Harold had a strange dream. He was back at the Grand Plaza Hotel on the night when it all began. But this time, when he asked for food in exchange for music, people didn't laugh. They applauded him even before he started playing. When he woke up, he realized the dream represented his journey, from a desperate and humiliated man to a respected and admired master. "Eleanor," he said at breakfast, "do you believe in destiny?" "Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes I think everything that happened to me had a greater purpose. If I hadn't gone through all that humiliation, I never would have developed the humility needed to truly teach." "Are you saying all that suffering was worth it?" "Not that it was worth it. I would never say that. But that since I suffered, at least I'm managing to turn that suffering into something useful for other people." Eleanor smiled. "That's the definition of wisdom. Turning pain into purpose." End of story. And what about you, dear listener? What did you think of Harold Winters' story? Do you believe some injustices can transform us into better people? Leave your opinion in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more moving stories like this one.